Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Richard Moglin. Welcome to another Stock Market Outlook video. As always, we'll talk through the action of the market indexes, the potential true market leaders, my previous watch list over this past week. Then we'll cover a few different sources of sentiment from my surveys that I put out on Twitter, the Bears vs. Bulls poll, the put call ratio, NAAIM exposure index. And then finally, we'll wrap things up with the IBD Big Picture article and the GMI Signal from wishoneball.com. So let's dive right in and start with the market indexes. And let's look at the QQQ on a daily time frame. And first of all, big picture, you can see we're a few weeks out from this last correction. And now we've pulled back once again to the 21 EMA along this potentially supporting trend line right here at the bottom of this channel. And last week we did experience a few more distribution days. And let's actually go over here to Diamond Stock's post about this. Every single day he posts about the added distribution days on the NASDAQ, SPY, and Dow. And he also marks up these excellent charts showing basically where the clusters are of distribution days. You can see the Dow had 2 in a row on Thursday and Friday. The SPY also had 2 Thursday and Friday. And the NASDAQ did not have any this past week. So this is a very cool kind of visualization of clustering. And that's what you really want to keep track of, whether there's a lot of distribution in a very short amount of time. So I'll have a link to this post down here, and definitely go ahead and give Diamond Stocks a follow. So moving on to the QQQ on a daily time frame, we can start from this Monday. We had a gap down and we did close lower on the day. So kind of an expectation breaker from this day, but you can see we were poking above this upper trend line and getting a bit extended above the upper Bollinger Band on this day right here. So on Tuesday, we did move all the way down here, but recovered well. So this was a positive day in my mind. Then we had a nice move up above this high on this Wednesday. But then Thursday and Friday, we saw a little bit more distribution in the growth stocks. And you can see we gapped up slightly and moved all the way down, but didn't take out this low. And then finally on this day, we made lower lows as well, although we did potentially bounce off the 21 EMA and this area of interest with this potentially supporting trend line down here. So I am currently letting my positions work, and although they are pulling back, most of them are in lower volume. But if we do see more signs of distribution, I'll let my stops take me out and deal with each position individually. So that is a kind of day-by-day analysis of the QQQ, and from this bar, the expectation is sideways or lower. And taking a look at the weekly chart, you can see this was an inside week with overall a loss of 2.25% with a week closing range of 18.4% and a daily closing range of 28.2% on this past Friday. And overall, we are in a stage 2 uptrend, and the expectation from the SPY right here is sideways or lower. And moving on to the SPY, overall, it was down 1.46%, and it was also an inside week. And we had a weekly closing range of 26.9% and a daily closing range of 51.5% on Friday. And if you're not familiar with what the closing range represents, it's basically where the close is within the range of the high to the low. So if it finished right at the high, the closing range would be 100%, at the low, 0%. And usually for supportive action, I want to see at least 50% here. And in corrective markets, over 40% is considered supportive action. So that is the SPY, and we are in a stage 2 uptrend, and the expectation from this bar is sideways or lower. Moving on to the IWM, the Russell 2000, it was actually up 1.46%, so there continues to be a lot of strength here in the small caps, and we had a weekly closing range of 58.2% and a daily closing range of 43.7%, and the expectation from this bar is sideways or higher, and we are in a nice stage 2 uptrend. Moving on to GBTC, the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. Overall, it was also an inside week, down 11.44% with a weekly closing range of 40.3% and a daily closing range of 33.3%. So far, just some consolidation here, and the expectation from this bar is sideways or pretty much just sideways, but sideways or higher, and we are in a stage 2 uptrend at this time. Moving on to ETHE, the Ethereum Trust, you can see overall it was also an inside week, and it was up 2.11% with a weekly closing range of 67.2% and a daily closing range on Friday of 49.2%. And overall, the expectation for this bar is sideways or higher, and we are in a stage 2 uptrend at this time. We are above a rising 10 and 30-week moving average. Moving on to the Dow Jones, the DIA, you can see that overall it wasn't quite an inside week because we did take out this high right here. But overall, we were down 0.94% with a week close range of 33.5% and a daily close range of 63.5%. And from this bar, the expectation is sideways or lower, but we are in a stage 2 uptrend at this time. And you can see that during this consolidation week, volume was lower than this up week right here. Moving on to the FFTY, you can see overall the IBD 50 did quite well, up 2.91% this past week with a week close range of 63.9% and a daily close range of 46.2%. And the expectation from this bar is sideways or higher, and we are in a nice stage 2 uptrend. Moving on, we've got GLD, the gold trust, and overall we were down 1.27%, and we did take out this low right here. And overall, the week closing range was only 4.4%, and the daily closing range on Friday was only 7.4%. And the expectation for this bar is sideways or lower. We are not in a stage 2 uptrend at this time. Moving on to the VIX, you can see it was up this past week, up 12.89%. And lastly, we've got the XLF, which was also up this week, up 0.06%, although we did finish well off the highs with a week closing range of only 39.8% and a daily closing range of 47.9%. So the expectation from this bar is sideways or higher, and we are in a stage 2 uptrend at this time. So overall, looking at the indexes, as I pointed out with the clusters of distribution on the SPY and also on the Dow, we are seeing a little bit more added pressure on the leading growth names, but so far they remain in stage 2 uptrends. So moving on to the potential true market leaders, we'll go through all these charts here and just opening this up, let's get a sense of how the week closed. And you can see it's kind of a mixed bag. You have a couple more red dots over here than I would like. A lot of stocks with 3-bar breaks down below their 21 EMAs, and you have 2 TTD and also AMD now below their 50 SMA. But on the other hand, you also have a few stocks with some nice green checks here, signifying price and relative strength in all-time highs. So starting with fiber, let's go through the chart and let's go over to this main page right here. So overall, this was a downside reversal, as you can see from this dot right here on this past Friday, meaning that it took out this previous high, but then finished down and also with a poor closing range. And this also was on higher volume. So keep an eye out. If this breaks out this low, for me, that would be an early sell signal. Looking at Etsy, this also was down this past week on Friday, but it finished well off the lows, which is a sign of support at this point, and overall is in a strong uptrend above all these key moving averages. Looking at apps, you can see it's also above all its key moving averages, but once again, there was some signs of weakness on this past Friday and didn't quite close as well off the lows as Etsy did. Moving on, we've got GRWG, which moved up strongly on this Monday after it pre-announced its earnings, and then has pretty much been going sideways amid some market turbulence. So overall, the RS line is pretty much going flat, and it's trending well above all these key moving averages. Looking at CELH, you can see it's trending well above all those key moving averages and looks very, very strong. A nice new volume coming in here, big spikes, big blue bars are good to see. And moving on, we've got Futu, which is also a nice uptrend, although you can see that on this Friday, we did have a negative bar. Next up, we've got PGNY, which had a really nice move on this Friday. This was an oops reversal as well as an upside reversal on huge volume. Looks very, very strong. And once again, it's trending above all those key moving averages. Looking at Melly, it's above all those key moving averages with the RS line confirming as well. SC is also above all those key moving averages. And you can see it did pull back on this Friday on lower volume and it did finish pretty well off the lows. Next up, we've got Twilio, which you can see I use as an example of a kicker candle from my interview with Matt Caruso. And overall, it's into new all-time highs, although not on significant volume, but it is trending above all those key moving averages. Next up, we've got Upwork, which is pulling back on below average volume to that 21 EMA area, and overall is staying above all those key moving averages. Next up, we've got Zscaler, which is also right near all-time highs. And you can see there is a little bit of above average volume coming in here, but right now it's just going sideways and consolidating. So a quick kind of swing trading setup would be a breakout above this high right here at about 214.88. Moving on, we've got XP, which had a nice end to the week. You can see a nice upside reversal here on this Friday, taking out the slow, but finishing actually green on the day with a really nice tail. So overall, this looks strong above all those key moving averages. Moving on, we've got TSM, which is a leader in the chip space, and overall continues to trend really nicely above all those key moving averages. Next up, we've got Roku, which is above all those key moving averages. Nice volume here coming in, and it looks very, very strong. PLTR is still kind of squatting a little bit at this downward trendline break, but overall is staying above that 21 EMA, but it may need one more kind of correction before finally breaking out above these key highs right here. Moving on, we've got TTD, and overall it is below the 50 SMA, but staying kind of pretty close to it, and it's hanging in there. And overall, I would like to see this move up, form the right side of a base here, then potentially a cup with handle and break out above these highs. Moving on, we've got Peloton, which had a nice move earlier in the week off an upside reversal and then a nice 3-bar break on this Wednesday. But then it kind of squatted here at the upper Bollinger Band and pulled back on lower volume on this Friday, although it remains above all these key moving averages. Moving on, we've got Corsair, which also moved up and then pulled back on lower volume to end the week, back near the 21 EMA here and near the 50 SMA, and this was a 3-bar break down on this past Friday. Next up, we've got Net, which has moved up well off the bounce off the 50 SMA, but now is pulling back once again on lower volume, and it did have a 3-bar break to the upside on the 13th. Moving on, we've got Shopify, and it's consolidating nicely above this pivot at about 150, and I like this move on Friday, this kind of move off the lows and the 21 EMA as well. Next up, we've got NVCR, which is consolidating right near all-time highs, although it did have a move down here and a 3-bar breakdown on this past Friday on higher volume than the previous updates right here. So that is one thing to look out for if you are long shares. Next up, we've got Pins, which had a nice move to begin the week, but then had some kind of more volatile days here on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and it did finish below the 21 EMA, but it is finding nice support at the 50 SMA back here. Next up, we've got SQ, which moved up Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, but then did pull back on this Friday to the 21 EMA. Next up, we've got CrowdStrike, and you can see this did pull back below the 10 SMA, but is trending above the 21 EMA and the 50 SMA after an earnings gap up move. Moving on, we've got Tesla, which continues to trend above all those key moving averages, and although it did have a 3-bar breakdown on this Friday, it is staying above this low right here. Moving on, we've got Snap, and this did move up early in the week, but then did pull back on this Wednesday, and especially on this Thursday on higher volume. Although at this time, if we go to a weekly chart, it is staying above that key 10 SMA. Moving on to Zillow, you can see on this Friday, it broke these kind of lows right here, which is a warning sign, but it is staying above that key 21 EMA. Next up, we've got Fetch, which broke this kind of Darvish box here, although it did kind of bounce off the 50 SMA area. And if we go to a weekly chart, it did bounce off the 10-week simple as well. Moving on, we've got EMPH, which also had a 3-bar breakdown on this Friday right here. And overall, if we go to some other names in the solar kind of industry group, we've got SEDG breaking the 50 SMA on huge volume, Run pulling back as well, although it is just kind of reaching the top of this cup here. So potentially there is some support down here. What else we have? We have Airy, which also pulled back on Friday. And we've also got names like FSLR, which also experienced weakness. So overall, the entire kind of solar group is experiencing some selling, some distribution at this point. Moving on to PDD, you can see that overall it did pull back this past week and is now below the 21 EMA, although it remains above the 50 SMA. Moving on, we've got AMD, which had a bunch of distribution signs here on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I did end up selling my shares on this Friday that I started my position back in here. Overall, it's not showing good relative strength. You can see this is in a downtrend right here. It did have a 3-bar breakdown on this Wednesday. And finally, we've got NEO, the worst performer of the week, which is pulling back below the top of this cup here. And I'm still long my shares. I'm giving it a little bit more room. But overall, there is another gap to fill down near here. So that is a run through of the true market leaders. As I said at the beginning, you're seeing a little bit more signs of distribution down in here, but there are still stocks performing well up about 20% on the week in the case of Fiverr. So moving on to my focus list from this past week. Overall, we had 12 stocks on the list, and we'll go through each of their charts and talk about how they perform. So if we sort this by the weekly change, you can see the best performer was TRSSF, and this is a wheat stock, and overall it had a nice breakout on this day and this day, retaking the green line on huge volume, and this was an upside reversal as well as a 2-2 reversal, and it also broke this pivot on this day right here on Tuesday. So overall looks good. You have a bit of a hesitation candle here, but overall it's short-term extended, but still looks strong. And I love the volume coming in on this breakout. Next up, we've got MGNI, which I did enter off the break of this pivot here on Tuesday, and it moved up well, about 9% from my entry, and had a nice upside reversal action on this Friday. And it also broke the downward trend line on this day right here. And you can see this was an anchored VWAP pinch, which I'm still learning about. And I've drawn this lower anchored VWAP from this cup breakout and then from the top of this recent move. This is an anchored VWAP pinch, and often they move up quite quickly from a consolidation like this. So that is MGNI, and moving on, we've got NAAIM, and overall this was also a green line breakout on this Wednesday on nice volume coming in, then a consolidation day, and then an inside day and up to end the week on Friday. Next up, we've got IIPR, which is also in the wheat space, and it had a downward trendline break as well as a 3-bar break on this Monday. Then it went sideways, and then it had a nice upside reversal on this Friday. And next up, we've got LOB, which moved up on the week, up 4.35% from the open to the close. And once again, we have nice upside reversal action on this Friday. Next up, we've got PLTR, which we already covered. Next up, we've got ONEM, and overall, it's still building out this handle below this high here after this large cup shape. And I would expect it to need some time after this move to consolidate, shake out the weak holders before potentially challenging all-time highs. Corsair we recovered, NVCR we already covered, and moving on to AHCO, Adapt Health Corp. You can see overall it went sideways this past week, down 1.17%, and there's nice upside reversal action on this Tuesday and this Thursday. Moving on, we've got Snap, which we already talked about, and Fetch we already covered as well. So overall on the week, we had 8 out of the 12 green, and we had some nice performances from TRSSF, MGNI, and NAAIM Medical as well. So make sure you guys tune in tomorrow when I'll be posting my next video with my focus list for the week. So moving on, we've got some different sources of sentiment. I'll start with my sentiment surveys here on Twitter. And overall this week, we were down from 55.5% bullish all the way to 39.6% bullish. And I did make a chart here which identifies any instance where the basically percent bullish was below 45%. And honestly, I don't see too much of an edge here. And you can see at the very beginning of this rally, we were kind of climbing a wall of worry where even though we were moving up 10, 15, 20% off the lows, we were still seeing very low bullish sentiment, which really kept this rally going. And even at the bottom of this correction, it was only down to 40%. So there's not really any clear signal here. So I thought that was interesting. And if you see any cool trends here, just let me know down below in the comment section. And moving on to some more psychological market indicators from IBD, you can see overall the bulls versus bears poll is still very elevated at 63.7% bullish, which is at a very high level going back to 2018. And looking at the put call ratio, you can see it's also still pretty low, although it is moving upwards currently. And looking at the NAAIM exposure index, you can see it's all the way up at 106.76, which is very elevated. So keep that in mind. And if you want more information about how to use this indicator, I talked about it at length in my interview with Duckman1717, and I'll link kind of that portion of the video down below in the comment section. So moving on to the IBD Big Picture article, the headline is Stocks Today Suffer Broad Losses, Small Caps Take a Break from Fast Start to 2021. Reading through, they talk about how this sell-off is cooling down enthusiasm, which could be a good thing for the long-term health of this strong uptrend. The put-call ratio jumped from a severely low level of 0.48, and the VIX rose 11%. They talk about the selling in solar, which we discussed, looking at EMPH, SCDG, Run, all those different stocks. They have some thoughts about Delta as it respected the 10-week moving average. Distribution day on December 9th fell off the count of the S&P 500 due to the time condition. And reading through, they talk about how the IWM suffered its biggest loss of the year so far, down 1.5%, although on the week we saw it was up still for the 10th week in a row, or the 10th week out of the past 11. And overall, the IBD 50 performed well, even given the distribution signs that we are seeing. Reading through, they also discuss how there's some poor economic data. There's some speculation that portfolio managers might be raising some cash ahead of the inauguration. And they also discuss how Visa and MasterCard are showing some unusual weakness at this point. So overall, their take is a confirmed uptrend, although we do now have 5 distribution days on the S&P 500 and 3 on the NASDAQ. So to round out the video, let's go to the Wishing Well blog and look at the GMI Signal, which is still green since November 5th. And we had a score of 6 out of 6 on this past Thursday. And overall, taking everything into account, my view is still a confirmed uptrend, although there are some caution signs kind of appearing more frequently. We've got some distribution signs in the leaders, some more distribution days appearing on the S&P 500, the Dow, the NASDAQ. So all in all, I'm being a little bit more cautious and a little bit more defensive as well. Thanks so much for watching. If you did enjoy it, please go ahead and leave a like down below and subscribe if you're new to the channel. And I'll see you guys in future videos.